Hello and welcome to Willow Woodworks. My name is Richard. Today it seems like hat racks seem to be a very popular item. So if you're interested in a hat rack, I've got an interesting project for you right here. So if you're interested, follow along with me as I recreate the drawings for this hat rack that was developed by Daniel Hammes of Bearded Viking Woodworks. If you'd like to join his channel or see his video, I can leave a link in the description to his YouTube channel and to his Facebook page, and I'll even leave a link to the video that shows the build that he did of this project. So follow along and let's get started. Okay, so here we are in front of our computer screen again. And the first part we're going to make is that we're going to make the side pieces of this hat rack. Now, I'm going to start with the top plane on this, even though I don't normally do that for a piece like this, but because it's so long, this is going to make it a lot easier. I'm going to put a center line in here, and I'm going to put another center line going across through the center of my origin point, so that I can take and I'm going to create the general shape of our board. And let's see, we're going to mirror this over, and then we're going to mirror this over. All right. Now we want our board is 3.5 inches long, or I'm sorry, 3.5 inches wide. And it's going to be 27 inches long. So that makes it a little bit on the long side. Now let's take and extrude this. And our board is going to be 3/4 of an inch in thickness. Okay. So now that we have that, let's give this thing some texture right off the bat here. And we're going to take and make this, I believe this is going to be what I want. No, I need to adjust that. Okay, so we're going to come down here and we'll adjust it over to something that looks a little bit like that. That looks pretty good. All right, so now we've got our board right here at 3.5 by 27 inches. Now the next step is we need to drill some holes in here. So I'm going to select that front face, so open a sketch and go to our top view. Now here we need to drill a hole, so I'm just going to put a circle in here for right now, and I'm going to dimension that circle because we want to drill our hole at 1.5 inch diameter. Okay. And we also want this hole to be at 3.5 inches from the top. And then we also want that hole to be at 1.25 inches from the back side of our rack. Now I can take and I can extrude this down through, and so there's our hole. But now there's another thing, we need multiple holes. Now I could have taken and put in all of these holes individually in here, but there's a much easier way by using my linear pattern. So I'm going to select this edge down here at the bottom. You'll notice that my arrow down here is pointing to the right, okay? Because that's the direction that we want to pattern our pieces. And we want a distance of 5 inches between our holes, and we need 5 holes. If you notice here on the left-hand side, I've got 5 inches labeled up here, and I got 5 holes up there. Now I need to tell it what feature do I want to pattern. Well, I want to pattern that hole. and then say, okay, and there's my 5 holes. That's so much easier than laying out 5 holes individually. Now from here, we need to cut these slots that are in there. So again, I'm going to select this front face. I'm going to say open a sketch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here at that hole. I'm going to select the edge of that hole to highlight it. I'm going to say transfer the edges of that. So that brings me that full circle back again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line that just comes out like this. And then you'll notice my little dashed lines there. It shows me that I'm perpendicular to that previous line. And now I want it to be perpendicular to that one. So now I know that this line and this line are perfectly parallel to each other. But now I need to take and make that line tangent to the circle. So I just highlight them both and I say make it tangent. Okay. I also need some other dimensions here. I need to know that the width of our slot is going to be 3/4 of an inch, so I can dimension that much. I also know that I want this to be at an angle of 45 degrees. Okay? So now some people might be wondering, well, what the heck is he doing here? He's got all kinds of lines going in every different direction. Well, now I'm going to take and I'm going to trim off this line up there. I'm going to trim that end of that line off, but I don't want this part in here. So I'm going to trim that circle part. So now you can see I've got an enclosed drawing here. And now I can say cut extrude. And I'm going to cut down into my part just like that. So now at this point, I can go back and do the same thing as I did with the holes, is I can insert a linear pattern. Again, I'm going to select this bottom edge. My arrow down here is pointing to the right. I've already got my 5 inches up there and I need 5 of them. I just need to select what feature, and it's going to be this last cut that I just made, and just say, okay, there's my part. So now that I have the part made, I can go ahead and save this part. Okay, now that we have the sides made, we need to make the top and bottom piece. So again, we're going to create another part. And I'm going to go to the front plane and open a sketch. And then there's going to be a reason why I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to create a center line there. And I'm going to create a center line there in order to create this part. There's a reason for all of this that hopefully will make sense to everyone once I get there. So I'm going to take and mirror that. Now I'm going to mirror this. And now we want the width of our board to be 3.5 inches. And we want the length of our board to be 10 inches. So now let's extrude this to give it some thickness. Now, normally I just take and I extrude in one direction. But in this particular case, I want my sketch, because I want this origin point to remain in the center of the thickness of the piece. So in order to do that, over here on the left side, normally it says blind up there, but I can change that to where it says mid-plane, so that now my sketch is in the center of the thickness of the part. And now I can just tell it what the thickness of the part is, which is going to be 3/4 of an inch. So what it does is it extrudes it 3/8 of an inch in each direction for a total of my 3/4 of an inch. And there's my part. Okay. So let's give this part some texture. That looks pretty good. All right, but now we need some pocket holes. So because I've created my design features for my feature library, I'm going to select the end of this board and say open a sketch, and I want to go normal to that. I want to be looking straight on at it. You can see that here's my origin point. It's dead center of the board. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw two construction lines again, or center lines, however you might want to look at it. Okay? And now I'm going to place a point up here on this vertical line. Okay? Now I also want a point that's down here in the bottom, but I want it to be equal distance from the center. So what I'm going to do is highlight this center line and that point, and I'm just going to mirror it over. So now you can see that when I physically move the top point, the bottom point is moving with it. Okay? Now I'm just going to give this a dimension because I want the distance between those 2 points to be 2 inches. Okay? Now that I've located that much, I can now close that sketch. Now I can still see the sketch, but I can hide it if I want to. But at the moment, I don't. Now over here, this is the back side of our piece. And what I want to do is I'm going to insert one of my features that I've created. This is simply called pocket hole. Okay? And I'm going to simply select this front face, that point, and that face again, and voila, there's my pocket hole. Now let's do the same thing for the other hole at this end. So I want, again, my pocket hole to the right. Select that face, this bottom point, and that face again, and say OK, and there's my 2 pocket holes in the part. Okay? Now I don't need this sketch, so now I can hide that sketch so I don't see it, because I don't need to see it. All right? So that's the 2 pocket holes on the right end. Well, now I need 2 pocket holes over on this end. So I'm going to select that face, say open a sketch. Let's go normal to it and do just exactly like what I did before. I'm going to put a construction line or a center line, however you might want to call it, in between there. I'm going to add a point at the top on that line, highlight the point and the horizontal center line, and say mirror it. So I now have the 2 points. Give it some dimension. I want 2 inches between the points. And now I can close that sketch. Now at this point, see, there's our 2 pocket holes. This is the back side of our part. At this point, I want to insert a feature that is now called the pocket to the left. It's just the way I worded it. So again, I'm going to select this front face, this top point, and that face again, and then just say, OK, there's my pocket hole. Let's do the same thing for the other one. Go to our library feature, pocket to the left, select that face, the bottom point this time, and that face again, and say, boom, there it is. Now I can hide that sketch that I created before. So now I've got pocket holes at each end of the part. So rotate this around, and if I go to this view here, you can see that as we can see through the part now, you can see that there's our pocket holes on each end of the part. Now at this point, This part would represent the top and the bottom piece that we need for the hat rack. But there's one slight difference. The top piece has some key slots in it. The bottom piece doesn't need them. So here's where I'm going to use the configuration. At the top left here, I'm going to say add a configuration. And I'm going to call this top. Okay? And say okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate my board around so I'm looking at the back side of it. And I'm going to say open a sketch and go normal to it. Now again, I'm going to take and create these center lines right in the center of the board. And I'm going to place a point that's over here on this horizontal line, and then I'm going to highlight that point and the vertical center line and say mirror it, so I get a point over here. Now I'm going to give that some dimension, and I'm going to say that I want that to be 5 inches. Okay, now I'm done with this sketch for the moment. But now I'm going to use one of my feature tools again. So I'm going to say to insert a feature, the library feature, and I'm going to use this one up here called key slot, which is again a file that I created to make life a lot easier. Now here, all I need to do is select that plane and that sketch and say okay, and there's my pocket hole. Let's do the same thing for the other one. Okay, I'm going to add a feature from our library, say key slot, select the front face, and this point that's out there, say okay, and there's my other key slot. That saves me a heck of a lot of time. So now we've got our key slot in there, and so on. But now, if I go back to the default file, where's my key slots? They aren't there. That's because this is now going to be the bottom. Okay, I could take and create another configuration and label it as bottom, but it's not necessary because I'm just going to know in my own head that the default configuration is the one without the key slots. Okay, and all I have to do is change configurations, and there's my key slot. So one file, one board, but 2 different configurations of the same board. This saves me a tremendous amount of time. I'll get this back to normal, and now I can just go ahead and save this part. At this point, we're now ready to do some assembly. So let's go to our assembly file. Say we want to create an assembly. Now the first part I'm going to insert is going to be my top piece. Okay? And my top piece has my key slots in it and my pocket holes. Okay? So I'm going to be inserting that first because that's going to be the foundation of where I'm going to work from. Now I'm going to take and insert one of my sides. Now it's not exactly oriented the way I wanted or the way I would like it to be, but that's all right because I can take and rotate it up like this and get it at least somewhat in the ballpark of what I want. But now I can say, create these mates that I've talked about before. I want the inside surface, or this right side of that, to be mated to the end of the board. So it rotates it around to that. I also want the the back side of that top piece and the back side of the side piece to be flush. Okay, so now that I have that, but now I need to position it vertically. So again, I'm going to use the mates, and I want the top of that part to the top of our piece there. You see, it brings it down flush, but I want it to be a specific distance, so I just simply say select distance, and I'm going to say 4¼ inches, and it positions it for me right there. All right. Now that I have that, I can put the other side piece in, but I'm going to do something a little different here than I would normally. I could take it, just insert a part, this same part, and then do all the mates again, but I'm just going to simply use a linear pattern. I'm going to select the top edge of my top part, and now you see my arrow is now pointed to the left. That's not what I want. But over here on the left side, I can click this and reverse the arrow, so now the arrow is pointing to the right. Now I know that the length of this board is 10 inches, but I want the left side of the side piece to be flush to this. So I'm going to have 10 inches plus the thickness of that board, so I need to enter in here 10¾ inch. All right, I also only need 2 pieces, which is already in there. Just select the component that I want, which is the side piece, and just say OK. And there's my side piece. It's already there. That makes it so much easier. I can pattern things out like that, just like what I did before when I did these slots that were in here and the holes. I used the pattern feature. Now I can take and insert the bottom piece. So I can select my top and bottom and say that I want my bottom piece. Put that in here. Now I still need to do some mates here. I could have done a pattern, I guess. Really wouldn't have mattered. I'm just going to do it this way because I kind of like watching it move like it does. Mate the back side of that to the back side of this. So I have that. And now we want a mate from the top of this board of our side piece to the top of the bottom piece to be a certain distance, and that distance is going to be 19¼ inches. So it moves it down and positions it for me, and there we have it. There's our hat rack. So now it's time to move on to create our drawing. So we're going to take and select our drawing sheet. And then like I usually do, I like to insert the assembly of the project into that sheet. We will change the scale of this. Oh, let's go to that. That looks pretty good. And now that I have that, I can say add a sheet, so we can move on to, now we can start inserting our parts. So I'm going to take and say insert the drawing view of our side pieces. So here's our sides. I'm going to select the top view, and we're going to take and make the scaling of this to something like that. So I can now move this over, position it where I need. looks pretty good. And I need a projected view for the end of it so we can see the thickness. Make sure we got our hidden lines in there. Now I'm going to insert the drawing view, and I'm going to select our top and bottom piece, and I'm going to select the top piece first and put that in here, and make sure that I've got my hidden lines, and I need my projected view to show the thickness of the part. Okay. Next, I want to insert the model view of this to show the bottom. And you notice that the bottom piece does not have these key slots in here. So now again, I need to show the projected view of that. So it shows that. Now I can say insert the model items of our dimensions, and now I can sort out all of these dimensions. So at first we're going to have that. Here's our diameter of our hole. Here's our 45 degrees. There's a 3/4 inch width of our slot, a 3.5 inch dimension there, a 3.5 inch dimension here. Make that look a little nicer. And then we've got 5 inches from there. So we got 5 inch center to center on each piece. I'm going to go ahead and add into here a measurement that shows, just for somebody who may not know, that each one is an increment of 5 inches apart. At least this way here, it shows that they just need to keep showing an increment of 5 inches there. I'm not sure where that 5 inches came from, but we're going to get rid of it. We're going to take and hide that one because we don't need it. We're going to move this up like this. And we don't need a duplicate down here, so we can hide that. And then there's our top piece. Now all of these numbers here, these all have to do with the pocket holes. We don't need that because that's automatically taken care of according to our pocket hole bit that we're going to be using to create the pocket holes. So I can just hide those. They aren't necessary. Same thing with our depth of the pocket hole. Let's see, that's the depth of that. Yeah, I could leave, well, when you put the pocket holes in, the centering is automatically taken care of, so I don't need those. I don't need this, which shows the length of the pocket hole, which is also the same as this one over here, so I can hide that, clean this whole thing up. And this basically just shows the thickness of the part. Same thing with this one, shows the thickness of the part. So at this point, all I really need to do is, let's see, let's take and insert the drawing view of our assembly so that I can put that in here so that people can see this is how it gets assembled. All right. Basically, at this point, I need to put like a note in here showing that these are pocket holes. There is one other dimension that is missing, and that is to show the distance from the pocket hole to the pocket hole. So our 5.5 inches that we had in there, and there we have our pocket holes. We also need, I see that there's one other dimension it didn't give me. And that's going to be our distance this way on our pocket holes. So we now have that. Usually at this point, I kind of sit back and look everything over and see, is there any dimensions on here that I don't need? Is there anything that needs to be adjusted, such as our 1.5 inch dimension here for the diameter of the hole? Looked a little wonky. So I think I've got everything on here that I need. And it's just a matter of putting the labels on here to show that these are pocket holes, to show that these are key slots that are in here, and show that this is the top piece, this is the bottom piece, and that this is our side pieces, and that we need to make 2 of them. Other than that, there's our drawing. And there's what our finished drawing looks like with our labeling showing our side pieces. You need to make 2 of them. Here's our key slot note. This is our top piece. This is our pocket holes. You'll also notice that I've changed this so that this is now showing the imperial dimensions instead of fractional dimensions instead of decimal dimensions. A lot of people were complaining about that. This also shows in the assembly view that, our distance from the top to the top of this, and from the top of the side piece to the top of the top piece has that dimension on it. So this should give everybody any and all information that they should need. Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and it's been a little bit educational to some of you people. Now, if you're interested in making this hat rack, check the links down below in the description and follow along with Daniel as he does his build of this. And until next time, make some sawdust and enjoy yourself. Have a good one. Bye-bye.